Hey ladies, this is Mocha Mommy here bringing you another video. And in this video, I'm going to continue with my Republican rants. It's not as if the Democrats are exempt from criticism, because I intend to go in on them too on another video. It's just that it's very obvious to many people who are opposed to MAGA that there's a lot of ignorance among its constituents, and that particular party is playing on your ignorance. In this video, I'll be focusing on the areas of energy and education. Energy for the longest time has been a very left-wing issue. The needs for alternate sources of power other than fossil fuels has really been fueled by a lot of left-wing quote-unquote liberals. But lately, a lot of Republicans have really been embracing the idea of clean energy and energy independence, something that was chartered by, again, President Barack Obama. Of course, they love to make fun of how President Barack Obama failed and bombed with funding Solyndra, but nobody really talks about the even larger failure of Enron under the George Bush administration. Enron was a Houston, Texas-based company that had long been at the receiving end of taxpayer funding from Texans, and then became a publicly traded company and took a lot of their financial mishaps and missteps to Wall Street. That then set negative reverberating effects through the economy when that company declared bankruptcy in 2001. That had been the largest bankruptcy in American history until the financial crisis of 2008. In September of 2008, George Bush and the Republican-led Congress had put $700 billion into bailing out these failed banks, but then post-dated the checks for January, for which the Barack Obama administration would then have to dispense the checks that the Bush administration had wrote in September. So while the $570 million Solyndra failure and green energy investment didn't really pay off for Barack Obama's 8 years, it did stem a huge investment on lots of green energy that is sustainable for the United States, and then subsequently became other businesses. We still have yet to see if the $64 billion Enron scandal will ever pay off, or the $700 billion bank bailout of 2008 will ever benefit the American people or the American economy. This is where the Republicans are counting on you to have a short memory and to not do your due diligence on research. Another front where you see a lot of Republicans tanking the American economy and intentionally misleading the American people is the area of education. Republicans will have you believe that teachers and drag queens and books on shelves are indoctrinating our students. They're the reason why we have so many problems and the ills today of society. When in reality, in many Republican states, there have been cuts to education and denial of free lunches to low-income students, repeated failures to spend infrastructure dollars given by the federal government on education, poor enforcement of student loan repayment for banking entities that are within their voting districts, all in favor of funneling taxpayer dollars to private education corporations in the form of vouchers. While school vouchers seem like a good idea because of how many problems we have with our public schools, it actually introduces more problems than it solves. States like Arizona and Florida, with some of the largest school voucher programs, have been rife and riddled with corruption. There has been many unaccounted for taxpayer dollars that have gone down the drain, and the private schools have not exactly proven that they can provide a better or more quality education than public schools have. It also has shown that many of the school vouchers didn't go to the students that they promised it to. In fact, people who earn 150 times to 500 times the national poverty level are getting close to 40% of all taxpayer-funded school vouchers. That's right, people who are already rich, already have their kid in private school, are benefiting more from school vouchers than low-income people. Sometimes the voucher isn't enough for low-income families to still send their kids to private school. Also, many of the vouchers programs only designate 30% of those funds to low-income students, and only 20% to students with special needs. So therefore, the people they're marketing the program to are not in fact getting the benefit of the taxpayer dollars for school vouchers. Why is this, you say? Why would school vouchers not go to the people that they're promised to? It's because, unlike an elected school board that is directly elected by taxpayer dollars or people within a district, vouchers are dispensed by the state comptroller's office by committees that are not voted in by the people. Those committees have arbitrary rights to give money to the private education institutions and private education corporations without the say of parents. And there's nothing parents can do. And since these entities are private entities, the schools and the education corporations, they have the right to kick out any student they want, to accept any student they want, and to reject any students they want. So therefore, it takes a lot of power out of the hands of the parents. Now, this is coming from somebody who sent their kids to private school, and it's not as if I don't think that other parents should have that opportunity. And if vouchers were in the form of something like a tax rebate or a state-funded scholarship fund, I would support it, but nothing that puts money into the hands of corporations and students who already have the access to private education, giving them more taxpayer dollars. Again, this is where these Republicans try to okie dokie you and fool you. Nick Freitas is a huge advocate of school vouchers. This is because he's a homeschool dad. I'm putting that in air quotes, because even though he talks about he doesn't pressure his kids to go to college, I can guarantee you, as a homeschool dad, I'm putting that in air quotes, he will guarantee that his kids have access to private tutoring that will make them eligible for any college they do want to go to should they decide. All funded on your taxpayer dollars. Also, him, like a lot of Republicans, like to claim all of these victories. There's been an increase in homeschooling from 9% to 13% in the past 4 or 5 years since COVID. But we have to understand that a lot of these parents are deciding to homeschool is not because of these conservative Christian values and them, quote unquote, taking back the country. A lot of parents decided to homeschool after Uvalde. That one hit close to home. That's less than an hour away from here, and many of those families have family here. They want to defend their guns, but they will never, ever address our grief. Now, I will almost bet that this will be a guy who will vote against children's health insurance and school lunch, but still collect ag exemptions for his land and NRCS grants for his greenhouses. Another way they love to put the okie doke on you is to make people who are uneducated believe that minorities who are educated are all there because of DEI, affirmative action, and are unqualified leaders and professionals. If you remember, I talked in my last video about Governor Rick Perry and his College Credit for Heroes program. I was actually part of the trial run of that program between 2009 and 2011. And then when the program finally rolled out in 2012, I had decided to leave the hospital system. After getting an advanced master's degree, an accelerated master's degree, I decided to leave the hospital system and then go into academia. I had small children. Employers and colleges started accepting relevant work experience as part of their degree programs and as part of their requirements for hire in order to meet the need for positions that were open in healthcare, energy, and other parts of the economy that needed skilled workers. Well, some of the people who took advantage of most of these programs, not just the one I taught, but programs around the country, were Black women and Hispanic men. As the job market tightened up, a lot of traditional students really started to see this as an unfair advantage. I didn't see it that way. I felt that it was up to the market. If you had found someone who maybe had been a vocational nurse or had served as a combat medic, and when clinicals came around, they just seemed to be a better fit for your particular hospital system, and they got the job before a traditional student who may have been bringing excellent grades to the table. That's just up to the market. And when the market started kind of leaning more towards some of the experienced workers who may have not had the top GRE scores, who may not have had things like advanced anatomy and physiology because they had come out of a associate's degree program or the military or an online education program while they were working, as opposed to a traditional student. Now there becomes this friction and this tension. And that's when they started throwing a lot of DEI under the bus, because sometimes not only did you hire a Black woman, you also hired her network. Me alone, I outperformed a lot of our hospital systems recruiters by, in about a little over a year, I had brought in 9 people who were from my network into our hospital system. It was just talent funnels that the hospital system had never bothered to mine before. And now all of a sudden we're seen as these DEI hires, even though we bring a level of experience to the table that some traditional students who were rotating through that facility didn't bring, and then as a result weren't hireable. Also, that also happened with a lot of graduate school programs. You would have a lot of traditional students who sometimes didn't finish because financial reasons, whereas someone who's a working adult may have the financial means in addition to some of their employers' tuition reimbursement opportunities. So again, these are all things that play into DEI. And it's really interesting because in 2020, when DEI started becoming a major talking point, especially after all the Black Lives Matter protests, Donald Trump bragged about his low unemployment numbers among African Americans. And now we have MAGA Republicans wanting to take DEI back and also insinuate that people of color are not good leaders. They're not strong professionals. They have weak academics, even though they're bringing other sets of skills to the table. And we also can't forget about the Great Resignation. That brought a lot more people into the workforce that had formerly been marginalized. That gave rise to many overlooked populations the ability to apply for positions that they formerly had never been considered for. Another thing they're trying to do is weaponize the skilled trades against people who have more of a formal education. Even though most of the talking points are aimed at their uneducated masses who are not even in the skilled trades. Okay, let's get this straight. Because if you really talk to people in the skilled trades, the wealthiest person I know is a roofer. You'll find that they have another set of needs from the next generation of roofers. And those are skills around high emotional intelligence and good communication. You really have to have a level of emotional intelligence to be able to talk to someone and help navigate them through one of the most difficult experiences if their home is subject to damage from a natural disaster. Oftentimes, you have to have strong task management skills when many homes in an area has been impacted by a natural disaster. And you have to have good communication skills to be able to communicate work timelines, costs, and boundaries. Some things are fixed by a roofer. Some things you have to get a general contractor to do. So you have to make sure that you're communicating those boundaries. Listen, the technology can make people who are less apt to have good construction skills, it makes it more accessible. And also you have to deal with the fact that you have a lot of workers flooding the market who are willing to work for a lot less, especially if they're undocumented. So those really good communication skills are going to really come in handy when you're in the skilled trades. And mechanics are no exception. Nowadays, with so many warranted coverage for repairs, it's really important that you have really good written communication skills to be able to talk to customers and to be able to justify the cost of your labor to warranty companies that only want to pay a flat rate. Again, this is one of those things that if you're dealing with education, it's really important that everyone have good verbal and written communication skills if you're going into formal education or the skilled trades. The reality is that those skills have been ignored, and we have more and more functionally illiterate adults who can't clearly articulate themselves with the written word. And customer service is going to be very important because even with AI, people still will pay a premium for a really good face-to-face interaction. And it seems as if so MAGA Republicans are definitely fueling this war on education. Homeschool against public school, private school against public school, vocational education against formal education, people with real world skills versus people who have quote unquote merit. And they're using uneducated people to fuel this war. And what's so scary is that not providing real opportunities for our youth. As MAGA keeps cutting programs like the intentions to cut school lunches and opportunities for English as a second language or special needs students, they're distracting people with things like drag queens and transgendered boys playing girl sports. And that's what's so frightening about this election season. It seems as if people who don't have experience in areas of the economy, in healthcare, in education, have the mic. Because even in this information age, you have a lot of misinformed and uninformed people who distrust a lot of media outlet, university studies, expert advice, and even research talking points. So what's my advice? Stay educated, stay aware, skill up, make sure that you are practicing those great communication skills, because the reality is that this MAGA movement may get votes, but it's going to leave a lot of workers in the dust. So make sure that when it comes to the education and the environment and your finances, you make the best possible decision for you. This is Mocha Mommy, and I'll see you in the next video.